couldn't agree more on that statement. This last statement you made, ranking member. Now I'll recognize Mr. Fulcher, the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee. You're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here today. I've got a question. I'm going to start with Mr. Heather, but I want to set it up with a couple of comments first here. I'd like to talk about the different approaches to AI regulation and ensuring the U.S. companies don't face unfair barriers to selling their products and services abroad. And as noted by some of the testimony we saw with Europe's privacy law, GDPR, that technology regulations can have a significant impact on trade and investment. And although GDPR regulates how personal information is collected and used, it also regulates cross-border data flows and has prevented some American companies from selling into the European market because regulatory barriers are simply too high. It's my understanding as well that Europe's AI Act is grounded in the continent's product safety framework, which means Europe is regulating AI the same way it does many other things. Elevators, gas stoves, and jet skis was the example we were given here. So I'm not sure how wise of a decision that was, and I'm concerned that it may create trade barriers that hurt American exporters and, by extension, American workers. So with that, Mr. Heather, can you share from your perspective how well-established European laws such as GDPR have impacted American companies trying to sell into the European market?
15 years ago, the Chamber created the Center for Global Regulatory Cooperation because trade agreements, quite frankly, were dealing with barriers at the border, but companies were having problems being able to compete in foreign markets because of divergent regulatory approaches. And so it's easy for large companies to have the compliance that they need, systems to be able to find ways to get their products and services into multiple markets, even if it's at an added cost. But the problem with regulatory differences are primarily what happens to small and medium-sized enterprises who are ultimately locked out of those markets. You mentioned GDPR. Maybe this committee is not aware of this, but Europe is now going to go back and revisit GDPR. Why? Because they finally found the humility that they lacked when they passed it. There is now a recognition in Europe that GDPR has gone too far. They're going to begin a process now of reevaluating it and recalibrating it because they realize it missed the mark, that it was overreach. They realize that the way they've implemented it across their member states with DPAs, data protection authorities, it's been done in an even manner. And so these things absolutely represent barriers to the U.S. ability to compete in European markets, to sell products and services, to export. So you're absolutely spot on. We expect the AI Act, as it is implemented, to create these same kinds of trade frictions.
Thank you for that. Mr. Bhargava, I'm going to ask a question of you as well, but I need to apply some background for that too. Over the last several months, we've delved into AI's role in energy manufacturing and other industries, and one issue that came up regarding China's Made in China 25 included investments in AI, semiconductor, quantum, 5G, robotics, and so on. And state-directed industries, the Chinese Communist Party, they're trying to monopolize those things. In the face of Chinese progress in emerging technologies, I'm concerned about the U.S.'s ability to maintain its leadership position, if in fact we still have one. I'd like to get your opinion on that. And the AI race, especially if we were to follow the European approach, which I don't see us doing, or allow a patchwork of AI rules to develop across the various states. So with that, if you could just share for a minute or so, are you confident, first of all, are we still in the lead in AI? And can we continue to maintain the edge in AI technology over China on this path?
Yes, I believe the U.S. does still have a lead, but many of the Chinese models are 85 to 90% of the way they are to where the cutting-edge U.S. models are. So I would say it's not a major lead, but we certainly do have a lead from a technology perspective of most of the evaluations of AI models done. We have 4 or 5 marquee labs, while they have generally 2. So the U.S. has that lead, but it's a close one, and I think that it's incredibly important we stay ahead. And for me, the trick to staying ahead is not necessarily big tech, it's in our startups and our innovators. In November 2022, ChatGPT was launched. Very few people had heard of OpenAI or ChatGPT. Today, it's one of the leaders in the space. Same with Anthropic, which spun out of ChatGPT, for example. So the reason the U.S. is here today, the reason we're ahead today is our startups. And we have to think about how to continue to give them that edge. And giving them that edge means giving them guidelines. and not necessarily a framework, a patchwork of state regulations or over-regulating. So we need to come up with that right balance. The U.S. has the lead today. It's thanks to our startups, not to big tech, and I think we can continue to do so if we have those startups in mind.
So I'm going to paraphrase by saying our job is best with guidelines, not some burdensome overreach in terms of regulation.
Absolutely. And we see companies in the U.S. and in Europe. So in GC, we have a really clear perspective on this. And in many cases, the laws have really the best intentions in mind. People want to protect consumers. They want to create frameworks. And partially, it's because the federal government has not stepped up to have a framework that we're leaving it to the states to regulate. So my really strong encouragement is that this group works together in a bipartisan way. I read your 200-plus page report, and I really think that if we can turn this into policy and enact it on the federal level rather than leaving it to the states, it would be in the best interests of the startups that we represent at General Catalyst.
Thank you, Ms. Bhargava. I've overreached on my time, so,
sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
No problem. Thank you very much.